All right, good day, everybody, and welcome to the California Apprenticeship Initiative's February webinar. My name is Caleb Van Docto with Social Policy Research Associates. Many of you may be familiar with my voice or perhaps even my face if we've had an opportunity to cross over with one another through the CAI or other avenues over the last few years. I'm part of a technical assistance team for the California Apprenticeship Initiative, along with our excellent colleagues at the Foundation for California Community Colleges. I'm quite glad to have a conversation today around a topic that I think has been of interest for some time from a lot of different grantees as well as partners and individuals who are connected with the development of apprenticeship through the state of California and beyond. And that is really taking a hold of what employers look for, how those relationships really start to generate, develop, advance or evolve over time, and really think about some of the shortcuts or learnings that different grantees and folks have learned over their experience working with both the CAI as well as just the development of their apprenticeship programs overall. Eduardo, my colleague, is on the backside and will help us advance the slides. Thanks so much, Eduardo. And just a couple of housekeeping notes for us. So for those who are joining us through the Zoom platform and not only on the phone, in case you are not familiar, you can interact with people through the chat feature. Speaking visually, if you use your mouse, just floating your mouse over the Zoom platform, you should be able to bring up a banner, typically along the bottom, occasionally along the top or side of your screen, that provides options such as seeing the list of participants of who's in the room, as well as phone or camera features, and there is a feature for chat. If you click on chat, it should bring up a box that allows you to see people typing in questions or ideas or thoughts. Along the way, during this webinar, we encourage questions that people have. The first half is going to be a conversation with our guests on the line, and so you may have questions that come up that we can't get to immediately. I really encourage people to drop questions into the chat. You can make them available for everybody to see, and we will log them on the backside and then ask those questions towards the end of the call. Any questions that we don't get to, also we can follow up after the fact as well. For folks who are not on Zoom and do not have access to that chat feature, we will make space towards the end for lines to open up, and you can unmute yourself to ask a question if you have something burning that you really want to bring up. To mute or unmute your line, that is *6 on your phone. Otherwise, you should be automatically muted when you came into the room. And with that, Eduardo, if you wouldn't mind advancing. So our guests today, I'm very pleased to have joining us our colleagues from Coastline College. Dr. Nancy Jones is the Dean of Instruction, and she'll speak a little bit about Coastline and give us some background. And she is joined by Craig Oberlin, who employs some of the apprentices with Coastline and has partnered for a while. He is the Senior Director of IT and Identity and Access Management and the Chief Information and Security Officer for the larger district. And so he'll be able to speak to that early partnership and how they evolved and developed. We're also joined by a friend of CAI, John Fox, who's the president of AMTAC, which serves as an intermediary and works in collaboration with a few different districts, including the City College of San Francisco. And we're lucky enough to have a representative from the City and County of San Francisco, Margot Reed, who is the project manager for Apprenticeship SF, to be able to speak to how that relationship has developed and advanced. Welcome all. Thank you all for joining us. And I'm going to kick this off by turning it over to Nancy to give us a little bit of a background of who Coastline is and how you are currently working with your apprenticeship program. So please take it away.
Thanks. So Caleb gave me 10 minutes to talk about one of my favorite babies. So this is going to be really tough, so I'm going to go through this quickly. But if you have questions at the end, feel free to ask. So our apprenticeship program is dealing with cybersecurity. So go ahead and move to the next one, Eduardo. So just a little bit about us. We are one of the apprenticeship grants. We're from the second round. We were awarded the grant in late December of 2016, so it took us a while to get started after we came back from break in 2017. Our requirements were that we were to register 50 apprentices by the time the grant was over. Originally, the grant was for 2 years, but I guess everybody was having a heart attack trying to come up with getting those the 50 registered in time. So they did expand the apprenticeship program from 2 years to 4 years. So when we first started out, we were just, okay, we had to be, getting, 25 apprentices every year from the very beginning. And so it was nice to be able to step back and, excuse me, take a little time to get things going on this. So, excuse me, as I mentioned, our program is a cybersecurity apprenticeship program, and our curriculum, Coastline is the first community college in California to receive the CAI designation. It's a Center of Academic Excellence in Cyber Defense from NSA and Homeland Security. There are now about 6 of us community colleges, but we were the first. And so as part of that designation, you have to align with different types of industry, national industry standards for what is expected of a cybersecurity program. And so we align with the CAI knowledge units and the NICE Security Workforce Framework, which was developed by the Department of Commerce. So we also align with the CID model curriculum for ITIS. This is not, hasn't been accepted as a full ADT, but it is a model curriculum that allows us to be standardized with everyone else in the state. We have registered with the with DOS, the Division of Apprenticeship Standards, in 2019. We also received our registered status with the U.S. Department of Labor. And something else that was kind of interesting is we also have been receiving funding from a collaboration with the American River College. They have a federal grant. Ours is a state $1 million state grant. So go ahead and go to the next one, Eduardo. So the program qualifications, we came up with students had to be 17 years of older. The reason we did 17 is that we wanted to be able to create a pathway with our K through 12 students, and some of the graduating seniors are only 17, and so we wanted to make sure that they could be part of that. You have to be a California resident, which has been a problem for us because California community colleges can't, not let people in because they're not residents of the state. So for this program, because our employers all have to have people who are allowed to work in California, we're asking that California residents. Plus, our program is designed to be able to, once the grant is gone, we want to be able to pull down FTES for everything to help support it and sustain the program. And so to do that, we didn't want to be having to pay for the tuition. So as part of our grant, we pay the tuition, we pay the books, and we pay industry certification. So I would rather be paying in-state tuition for my campus through the grant instead of having to pay out-of-state tuition. So that's why we had everyone be a California resident. There are pre-apprenticeship requirements are that they have passed the A+ certifications for both hardware and software, and they have to give us documentation of that. They also have a GPA and academic requirements. And the reason we did that was we were having students who just wanted a job and were not prepared academically or mentally to go through the rigorous courses that we have for the program, the training. And so we don't publish it because we like giving people an opportunity to have a second chance. If you were someone who started college 20 years ago and failed everything and dropped out, we didn't want that to limit you coming back. So we don't publish it, but we try and do it like a 3.0, but we do make exceptions for those that, you know, really have demonstrated that they can make it through. Authorized to work in the U.S., and they have taken less than 3 courses from the list that we're offering, and that goes back to, again, to the sustainability. We didn't want to just have our apprentices come in and get industry certifications and things without us being able to collect FTES for them. So next slide. So the program model is with all apprentices. You need to have 2,000 hours. What we did is we tried to set it up on a approximate 30-hour week, because with the Obamacare, you know, people were kind of shy of hiring people where they had to provide health care mandatory. But since they're taking our classes while they're in the program, they already get health care benefits from as being a student, and we pay for those fees as part of the program. So they are still getting the health care, but we're trying to eliminate that burden from the employers that we're working with. We also offer CompTIA certifications. You'll notice the courses on the right-hand side of the screen. So we have a core of Network Plus, Security Plus, Server Plus, and Intro to Python. Those are the 4 key classes recognized as CAI knowledge units, as well as the NICE framework. And then we have 2 different tracks. We have the cybersecurity with the Linux Plus, Pentex Plus, computer forensics, and computer security analyst, or the Cisco. But out of the 63 that we have registered in the program, only 1 has done Cisco. So we haven't had to pay for any of the Cisco exams. But we do offer vouchers for all of the students who have gone through the program, have finished with a C or better, and have gone through the test prep modules that we've prepared for them, and then we give them a voucher. So they can take the test one time. If they don't pass it, then they have to pay for second chances on that. We also provide their textbooks. We don't let them keep them. We check them out like in high school, because that got to be so expensive, and thinking about sustainability, we need to be able to use them more than one semester. For the RSI, we use career readiness workshops. Those are on generally Saturday. I'll talk more about those. And we found through our placement that we need to put in a 3rd track, which would be for the Department of Defense, because we are starting to pull in a lot of the contractors from the Los Angeles Air Force Base. So, next slide. Thanks. So, the exam preparation workshops, and for those of you, I'm assuming that many of you either have apprenticeship grants or you're going to work after it, or, you know, trying to achieve one. So, there is an RSI, and so RSI in apprenticeship terms is the supplemental instruction. We provide our 81% of what we do as a college is by distance, and RSI is regular substantive interaction in the online world. So that was hard for me to get my head around for a long time. But so what we've tried to do is we've created classes. We created them as 1-unit classes. We're going to transfer those over to non-credit. But that way, students take a class, and then we put them through an online test prep that they can work through at their own pace, to give them practice tests, give them an opportunity to go back and revisit some of the topics that they need. And then once they have gotten to a proficiency of, 90% accomplishment on the practice test, then we issue them their voucher. So at that point, we feel that they're going to be pretty good at passing the exams. But we have aligned with the industry certifications, And for those of you with community colleges, that's one of the strong workforce metrics that you need to meet, as well as Perkins. Next slide. Okay, our on-campus workshops. This also is the RSI that, since we're a grant right now, we don't charge the state for RSI because that was already part of the grant that we had. But once our grant ends in December, we would then be eligible to apply for RSI augmentation from the state, just like the other apprenticeship programs. And so we wanted to make sure that we had enough modules in RSI that we could be able to generate the funds to be able to pay the college back, in essence, for giving them free tuition. So we've built soft skill courses because we found that, you know, computer geeks, we don't always play well with each other. Let me run through these real quick. 30-second elevator pitches, resume clinic, mock interviews, and new technologies. Eduardo? Thanks. So for the sustainability, I talked about having all of these other classes for RSI, but our students are also taking credit-bearing classes. It was nice because about the first year and a half into the program, the state did approve that, where we could collect FTES for these students. We have industry mentors and employers who partner with us to help us give different workshops and things. We have the exam prep, we have career readiness workshops that we do, and then we also partnership with different professional certification organizations to help us be able to have a reduced or free industry certification. So next slide. So right now we have the, it's actually the 7th cohort. I was being too optimistic. It's the 7th cohort that started in October of 2019, and the next one will start in, the first one started in June of 2017, so that was a real quick turnaround. We try and add now one in the fall and one in the spring. The reason we do October is that the graduating seniors from high school, they can graduate, take summer school classes, get their A+ certification, and then move on into our program. So we try to do that. There are now 63 registered apprentices in the program, so we've met our goal of 50. And what we do is we do our training up front and then place the students, although we have many of the students are coming in with jobs already, and we've worked with their employers to elevate their, excuse me, their job skills and their basic pay as they go through and learn more things. So that's my last one. So with that, I want to introduce Craig Oberlin to you. Craig is one of our, I'm with Coast Community College, Coastline Community College. He's at the Coast Community College District, and he has had several of our students as apprentices. So Craig, do you want to take it from here?
Sure. Thanks, Nancy. As Caleb and Nancy both mentioned, I am the Chief Information Security Officer for the Coast Community College District. And for those of you who may not be familiar with cybersecurity in general, the SOC stands for Security Operations Center. So I'm going to chat a little bit about our experiences so far with a student/apprentice staffed Security Operations Center. Next slide, please. So a little bit about us, as Nancy talked about, Coastline is one of the 3 community colleges within our district. We serve as a whole about 50,000 students with about 20,000 equivalent full-time students, because many of our students are part-time, and the way it all adds up is about equal to 20,000 of those. From a technical perspective, we have about 8,000 computers, that'd be desktops, servers that we have to support and secure, supporting multiple instructional disciplines, as things as traditional as math and science, and as far-flung as criminal justice, cybersecurity, and nursing programs. So you see a lot of different types of devices out there, more than just a traditional desktop. We have what is collectively known or often known as Internet of Things. So we have devices, we have smart robots out there that are connected to the internet that we have to worry about, as well as making sure that the normal administrative functions of the district are maintained, the business functions, accounts receivable, payable, obviously registration, grading, that sort of thing. Next slide. So one of the things that Nancy and I were chatting about several months ago was there seems to be a dichotomy within cybersecurity. On one hand, the press is full with, there's over a million unfilled positions in cybersecurity in the United States. And at the same time, as I listen to my peers and colleagues and the Twitterverse and all the various social media out there, there are people that appear to be qualified on the surface that can't get jobs. And it didn't make sense to me. And the one, in peeling back the onion a little bit further, was the fact that many of the employers were looking for entry-level positions with people that have 5 years of experience. And sometimes I think they're doing that by accident because they'll put a requirement in for a certain certification like the CAI, which has a minimum experience of 5 years in the business. So there was that disconnect in there, and we thought, okay, we have a situation where we need more cybersecurity within our district. There's a need to give our students and our apprentices more experience. So let's find a way if we can solve this problem. Obviously, Coastline was an obvious candidate for providing that because of our relationship with their relationship with the DHS and being a CAA school. And in talking with Nancy, we came up with this idea that maybe we could find a win-win opportunity for us. And while our district leadership from the boards all the way down through our chancellor and has been extremely supportive of building our cybersecurity capabilities, many community colleges, many public agencies within California and probably the United States still need more help. So this seemed like this was a good solution to go forward. And that little map in the bottom is what we like to call our pew pew map. And that's where we get attacked on a daily basis from all around the world. So I'm sure everybody knows cybersecurity is a big deal and becoming a bigger deal as we get closer to the elections. Next slide, please. So we, in designing, trying to determine what level of apprentices we could actually take on a security operations center where they would have sufficient background and knowledge to at least be able to communicate in the jargon and the vernacular that we use in cybersecurity. We said they have to have at least an A+, a network plus, and security plus. So they need to know something about networks. They need to know security, but we're not expecting them to have, be geniuses and be experts on all this already. We'll hopefully help them get to that point along with the apprenticeship program. But that was our men quals. One of the challenges that we had to work through, and we're still trying to working through, is hiring people under the ed code and under bargaining units in higher education in California. There's a lot of different laws and a lot of different moving parts in that whole process. And there is an apprenticeship, formal apprenticeship identification within the ed code. For priority reasons, we weren't able to make that happen quickly enough. So we went in with what HR calls a short-term employee. Because they came in as short-term employees, the restriction we have per the ed code is they can only work 160 days per fiscal year. Our fiscal year starts July 1, and a maximum of 19 hours per week. So it didn't align perfectly with the goals of the apprenticeship program, but we're pretty close. And of course, we gave priority to the cybersecurity apprenticeship, now the California Cybersecurity Apprenticeship Program students. But we also have one individual who is not part of that apprenticeship program, but who is now going to enter the apprenticeship program after talking to his peers and understanding more about it. So as long as they're willing to commit to it, and we know they're going to continue on, we said we'll give them a priority. And our initial hires, really, we relied upon the Coastline faculty to give us recommendations. Who are the strong people that have the passion and the inquisitiveness and the eagerness to learn, that would be very malleable and would be willing to learn to come into the SOC, because we know it's going to be a little bit overwhelming at the start. Next slide, please. So what the people in the Security and Operations Center do is they monitor, triage, and respond to security events. We get lots and lots of what we call events. It could be something as simple as a failed password or a successful logon from a different country. That doesn't mean it's an incident, doesn't mean it's a problem, but somebody has to take a look at it, understand the context with which that event is occurring, and then either take care of it or escalate it to one of my other team of our full-timers in order for them to take action upon it. in order to sort of promote this within our own organization, not only are they playing a security role, but they're also playing a little bit of what we call a network operations role. They're monitoring the availability of network, which technically falls within cybersecurity, and letting people know if there's a problem, they can report it very quickly. They're eyes on screens, if you like. They also monitor any incoming emails coming to our phishing@cccd.edu or abuse messages, so that if our users, which are very good at notifying us of potential phishing emails coming in, they can take a look at it. They're getting the basic skills on how to parse emails, understanding if there's attachments are malicious or links are malicious, and they can respond without having to take time away from our more advanced security engineers and that sort of thing. But if they can't, then they come to us. They also deal with any kind of alerts coming from the various network security appliances we have, our firewalls, our SIM, and our log systems. And then there's a ton of different types of alerts and emails, and notifications they may get from our Office 365 and our G Suite and the various tools that we use within our IT infrastructure to support the function of the district, as well as SolarWind alerts, which is more of an alert of an up-down type situation or performance problem. So they are the first set of people to respond to any of these types of alerts and escalate or take care of them. Next slide, please. So some of the challenges we had during this, as we're setting this process up, is there is a general security concern among folks that, how much information are you letting the students or our new part-timers know? Security people in general tend to be paranoid. That's what we get paid to be. And even some of the infrastructure team that, we have people that have been here 10, 15 years, they know each other, but now we have a new set of people that are coming in and getting access, at least from a view perspective, to information that they want to make sure is secure. So we restricted it only to read-only. They don't have the ability to actually take action at this point. We may visit that in the future, either on an individual basis or on a global basis, but right now that's the limit. And in their workstations, we've stolen an old Russian phrase that President Reagan also liberated, and that's trust but verify. That's where we trust them, but we're also logging everything they do, recording it, making sure that there's nothing either inadvertently causing problems or purposely causing problems. We are in the process of working with our HR department to determine what types of data they should or shouldn't be able to view, because they are students and we are looking at potentially other students' information. It might be, they don't have access to grades directly, but as they're looking at and doing research on some of these alerts, there might be information in there that would be at least sensitive, we'll call it. So we've got to understand what they can do and can't do. One of the other challenges we've had is, because we're dealing with 19 hours, and right now we have 3 folks in this program. We have ones that are working one day Wednesdays, and another apprentice is working Tuesdays, Thursdays. Then we have another person who spans the Tuesday, Wednesdays to give that communication between the shift and provide some continuity and communications between the ones, so that if there's an investigation that's going on that's spanning these time frames, and they're all during the day right now, we have a good way of tracking that and making sure everybody understands sort of what's going on. And of course, there's a little bit of challenge, a little bit of a challenge in just dealing the overhead in the normal turnover that we expect to see. If we do our jobs well, and if the apprenticeship program does their jobs well, these folks are going to find full-time positions, hopefully with us if we have that opportunity for them, but maybe somewhere else in industry. And so we know we're going to have a group of people coming in to that we may keep for just the 2,000 hours, and then they move on. And so we've got to routinize the process of bringing new people coming in, making it efficient and effective, realizing that we could lose them almost effectively at any time. And so part of that is we're doing lots of on-the-job training to fill the void between, practical, or give sort of the practical application of knowledge that they've attained through coursework and the apprenticeship program, and also bringing it to specific experience within our environment, because from a technical perspective, from a security perspective, every environment's a little bit different, and you have to customize it to that. Next slide. So we provided a number of tools for them. We've helped them with processes. We've had to set up, dedicated workstations. This is probably more technical than anybody really cares, but we've given them the tools so they can do both reverse engineering and understanding what threats might be coming in. We did an onboarding orientation, and we've been delivering a lot of this either literally real time. They'll bring an event to us, and we'll walk them through the process of how to attack this problem. We're doing lunch and learns, chalkboard sessions. We're using there's a lot of tools that are already out there on the internet on cybersecurity. So we're actually curating different video playlists that are out there on YouTube and the sorts, so they can get a better understanding how to use the multitude of tools that are available for them, and then creating cheat sheets for them to use to help them. And actually, they've been instrumental in helping build these cheat sheets and building some on-the-job, what we call a SOC analyst handbook. Next page. Slide. So all that being said, we're only about 6 weeks into this whole process. We had on our permanent staff, we had an employee move on to another organization who was going to be leading this. So we struggled a little bit first. We weren't quite as prepared as we had hoped to be, but the apprentices have been incredibly resilient. They're really eager. They bring a fresh perspective and have been making recommendations for improvements. One of the nice things about being in higher ed is there really is that we know we're here to teach as well as get benefit from their contributions. And so I think they're open to that, and they're not afraid to offer recommendations for improvements. As I said, they've actually provided some of the procedural documentation, and we're able to provide as benefit back to the district, more consistent, timely, and in-depth review of those alerts, where before we had this team, it was sort of, the squeaky wheel was sort of the alerts that we were dealing with, or events we were dealing with were the big ones, and we weren't able to get to the phishing emails as timely as we had liked to. Next slide. So one of the things we want to do to improve communication is to track our issues a little bit better, help them understand what information is important to record, which ones are not, actually put some success metrics in place. What does a good SOC look like? How do we know we're doing better than we were before? One of the measures we use is what we call dwell time, or the amount of time between an incident occurring and when we actually detect it. And then also trying to ensure we have smooth transitions into the next round of apprentices that will come in, realizing that they're going to be staggered. We may lose one, get one. We may lose two, get two. That type of situation. And actually, as long as we're making progress, we will. We'd like to add another apprentice as well. Next slide, but I think that's it, isn't it? Yep. So, Caleb, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Craig, and we'll keep you and Nancy on the line for any questions towards the end. And I want to switch gears to our other colleagues who are on the line, John Fox and Amtac, who can speak a little bit about the relationship that you have is one of an intermediary role, which is slightly different, but I want to quickly give you guys an opportunity to discuss how the intermediary role fits into the development of the relationship between the employer, the community college, and working with apprentices. So John, let me turn it over to you.
Thank you, Caleb. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. Could I have that just pop up the next slide? So what an intermediary is basically works with multiple gears in this case that work in sync to effectively develop and maintain successful apprenticeship programs. So this focus of this webinar is the employer, but I wanted to kind of talk in general what the other cogs are and how they all mesh together, and then I'll turn it over to one of my employer's participants to explain their role. So basically, what an intermediary is, it has to be a subject matter expert in many, many areas. So first off, governmental agencies. You have to have a really good understanding of the process involved with developing and creating standards and an apprenticeship program for both DAS and DOL. Then what you have to do is all apprenticeship programs have to have a local educational agency. And in our case, we use community colleges. And it's been my contention that you can create an apprenticeship program in any industry or any field, technical field, in which you have a local community college that supports that industry. So our industries that we target are transportation, manufacturing. So there's at least 10, I believe, colleges in the Bay Area. And we don't just work in the Bay Area, but that's our primary focus, that have classes in those two industries. So we may have an apprentice and we can pick and choose our community colleges depending on where the apprentice lives and where the apprentice works. And if there are multiple needs in terms of what the course requirements are for the individual standards, we can pick and choose the different colleges to send them to. So basically what we do is we create the standards, including the curriculum, and then we map our curriculum to the existing courses that are offered by the community colleges. So we don't develop new programs. We try to use our apprentices, allow our apprentices to take existing classes. So then moves us into the employer. And the employer is any apprenticeship program has to be demand driven. It has to have employers that are willing to participate in the program. And this is why I really like this particular webinar, because I think that that's the focal point. If you don't have a participating employer, you don't have a program. So you target the employers, and I'm going to not talk a lot about the employers. That's going to be Margot's responsibilities. But you have to have a working knowledge. An intermediary has to have a working knowledge or understanding of what the skill requirements of the employers that work in that environment that the employer works in. So you have to understand what training would be necessary to help them develop or help the employers develop their standards for their particular industry. Then if the employer has a union contract, you have to be able to understand and have working knowledge of the collective bargaining agreement between the union and the employer, because the union has to be on board with any apprenticeship program that are developed. MTech is what we call union neutral, and that basically means that we work with both union programs and non-union programs, but we also work with multiple unions. So in order to work with multiple unions, we have to work with California Labor Federation that has a good working relationship among those. But as you have for demand side, anything that you have you can also have the supply side. And the supply side is who's going to fill these apprenticeship positions. And our particular programs, they're full-time jobs. So we work with community-based organizations to try to develop talent to bring along apprentices that may be of a minority or of a certain population that is needed. And when you're working for municipalities, typically a municipality has to emulate, their workforce has to emulate the population. So in many cases, you don't have minorities or people of color in the program, so we work very closely with community-based organizations to get those individuals into the program. So I was given 5 minutes. I'm pretty much up. So if what I'd like to do is I'd like to introduce Margot Reed, who is with the City College, the San Francisco City and County of San Francisco, and she'll talk about how we all work together in developing both a pre-apprenticeship program and apprenticeship program with them. Go ahead, Margot.
Thank you, John, and thank you guys for listening. My name is Margot Reed. I am the project manager for Apprenticeship SF, which is the City and County of San Francisco's workforce development initiative to provide apprenticeship for all city and county workers or industries, I should say. Specifically, this is a municipality. We work on civil service apprenticeships, period. Private sector apprenticeships are part of the private sector, and I don't deal anything with them. Only the public sector, and as you know, The only way we're going to get to 500,000 apprentices by 2029 is by including the public sector. So I'm deeply involved in getting public sector apprenticeships moving. San Francisco, I'm proud to say, leads the state in municipal apprenticeships, and we are going to talk a little bit more about that. So next slide, please. I'm first going to talk about the intermediary that John just talked about. In a typical apprenticeship, the intermediary would be providing all those things that John talked about. It's a little different in the city and county because we are a civil service. Basically, we have to do everything through us and through the civil service system. We have to provide, our partnerships are with the city, not with the intermediary. So, for instance, with in our partnership with AMTAC, AMTAC is a partnership with City and County of San Francisco through the union that we work with, which is IMAW Local 1414, for the type of apprenticeship that we're working with John. I have apprenticeships across the board. We have an apprenticeship for stationary engineer, which is IUOE. We have apprenticeships with the plumbers, UA. We have apprenticeships with arborists. Here in San Francisco, that's with Local 261 or LIUNA. We have apprenticeship for gardeners. We have an apprenticeship for an electronic instrument tech, which is through IPTE. We have an apprenticeship with the laborer, which is also LIUNA. We have an apprenticeship with pile workers, which is through the Carpenters Union. So to just give you an idea, we have multiple apprenticeships. Getting them moving forward is the key for this in the CAI grant. Moving them forward is key for us in terms of how we develop and how we move it forward. Next slide. Thank you. Okay. We do the research and analysis from the department level. So in San Francisco, we have 62 city departments. We employ over, oh goodness gracious, we employ about 40,000 employees. Most recently, we had a apprenticeship career fair where we were at the Port of San Francisco, which represented 12 different crafts, for instance. We also have a cybersecurity team, and I'm very interested in that. That's really cool. We are developing, along with the City College of San Francisco, cybersecurity apprenticeship, and we're expanding it to a general IT apprenticeship. We have the first step for us, however, is to identify what is the actual need, and there's two ways we look at the need, and I think that almost every industry has the same issue. Do we not have enough people? If the answer to that is yes, then it's why don't we have enough people? Why are jobs open? And if the answer to that is we don't have enough qualified people in the pool, then we ask the next question, is it our recruitment or is it because people just don't exist? And in the world of high voltage, for instance, which is the high voltage power lines, the answer to that is that people don't exist. So we have to grow some. We have to grow our own. In the world of machinists, as we know, nationwide, we have to grow our own that don't exist. However, in other industries, the answer is there's a lot of people, but they all look alike. And speaking now to what John's point was about diversity and inclusion, then the goal for the city and county and all municipalities is let's figure out a way to get people who had traditionally been disenfranchised or out of the loop. How do we get them involved in an industry that may not have been one for them? They were not included in. And in that case, what we do is we look to our community colleges and we look to our community-based organizations to help us. One of the other things that we have to do is we have to work with our city attorney to make sure that any agreement that we come up with is actually legal and we can do it. A lot of times things that seem to make a perfect sense will not be perfectly legal. So we need to make sure that is correct first before we move forward. And then, of course, finally, we have to have an independent relationship with DOS and DOL, independent of the intermediary, because there may come a time in which we continue on with the apprenticeship and the intermediary is no longer a part of that process and works on some other project. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we work hard on is letting the world know that an apprenticeship with the City and County of San Francisco is actually possible. Surprisingly, many people don't realize that the city has or is involved in apprenticeships. We are either DAS-7, which is an agreement to train, or the apprenticeship is actually ours. And we've developed it, it's under our name, and we are the employer in a joint apprenticeship with one of the unions. In our case, as John mentioned, all of our apprenticeships are with a union. We don't have any apprenticeships that are employer only, including our IT. One of the things that we need to do is we have to coordinate very closely with the community colleges, not just in San Francisco, though they're our key partner because we're here in the city, but we have to coordinate with every community college in the area that offers the instruction that we need for the career that we're trying to develop. So, for instance, we use Los Medanos because that's where the strongest electronic instrument tech program exists. We will use Fresno or the Central Valley Community College because that's where the strongest labor training center is. We will use College of Alameda because they do a great job on heavy equipment. We use Merritt because they do a great job on machining. Laney because they do a great job on machining. We use Merritt because they do a lot of other programs that we can use. We have Skyline. So every community college in the Bay Area is, and slightly beyond, is a college that we might be using to provide an LEA for us. So I wanted to say is that we're not, as an employer, we're not restricted to just one community college or one area. You can go and you can actually have multiple. And in the case of our machinists, we do multiple because we have what's called an automotive machinist. And we have to use 3 different colleges in order to get that one career field taken care of. So that gives you an idea. We hold stakeholder meetings with the unions. We also hold stakeholder meetings with the community-based organizations. But it's key to have a stakeholder meeting when we're initially starting to make sure that any of the union's concerns are addressed. And also because a lot of times we can partner with a union that already has an apprenticeship and utilize their apprenticeship. Or in the case of the CAI grant, we were able to do something very unique, is to take the apprenticeship that already exists with the union and add the pre-apprenticeship to it, which was part of the CAI grant, with the community college and expand everybody's reach, which has been a very exciting experience for us. Next slide. Okay. All right. So to give you an idea of where we are and the kinds of apprenticeships that are available in San Francisco and the kinds of things that we are doing, and then a little bit of the challenges. IBEW is the union that we have to work with in order to establish an apprenticeship for the overhead, a high voltage overhead, as well as the catenary line, which is the DC electrical that runs the city buses and streetcars and cable cars. The challenge there is, as you know, PG&E is having its own little issue, and whether or not the state takes over politically, whether or not the state decides to take over PG&E, and then in which case the municipalities will take over electrical functions, which means that we'll have to ramp up incredibly fast or find ways to partner. transmission and distribution line worker, which is what we call the overhead lines or the catenary lines. Automotive machinist, maintenance machinist, automotive mechanic, auto body and fender worker, and car and auto painter are all under the automotive track. They are all part of IAMAW, and so it's one union. That's good, but there are multiple career fields. So we have multiple departments to work with, and in that case we're doing a regional outreach so that we can do something so that we're not stealing people from others, as you guys know about poaching, I'm sure. So in order to avoid some of that, we come up with partnerships with other municipalities to make sure that we're not training people for somebody else's job. We move forward to the cement masons, which is, again, that's a private-public partnership, which is very unique to us. And then the plumber, which everyone knows, we all need plumbers, but we are now expanding so that there's a utility plumber, that's the ones that work on the street, and the big pipes that come down from Hetch Hetchy all the way to the general plumber, which works in our building. So we're expanding the apprenticeship there. It's not because we need more plumbers. There are plenty to hire. However, the diversity among the plumber world is not as high as we'd like it, and so we're trying to reach some of our diversity and inclusion goals through apprenticeship. So, challenges, briefly, and very briefly, the challenges for us have most to do with something that was mentioned earlier, and that is having people that are prepared for the apprenticeship. And one of the ways that we're working to alleviate some of those challenges academically is to provide working with our CBOs to provide remedial classes for math and literacy so that people can actually pass the assessment to become part of the apprenticeship in the first place. And we found that working with CBOs is one of the ways in which we can provide a service that we can't provide as a city, and the community colleges support that, and that's a huge, huge piece because I think someone touched on it earlier. If you don't have the ability to actually pass the college courses, then it's almost impossible to get you to move forward. And so that's a big piece for us. In terms of funding, what we do is we call it a TX, which is we take an existing vacant journey job and we open it up for the apprentice position. And so it's a one-for-one exchange. So if we have 4 vacant journey jobs, we might take 2 of them and make them an apprenticeship position. And we'll still recruit for the journey jobs, but then we'll only recruit for 2 of them instead of 4 of them. And I am absolutely available to take any questions. I'm also part of the IACA group, so on civil service, and we've done some pretty amazing things with IACA to try to talk about non-traditional apprenticeships, to include the cyber. But that's it for me, because that leaves you 4 minutes.
Thanks, Margot, and thanks everybody. We went a little bit longer than I think we had intended, but this was a library worth of wealth of information for us all, and I really appreciate it. And this was just touching on 2 industries and 2 partnerships. And so if anybody has burning questions that they want to get in, please forward those along in chat. We do have a short list of questions, and we'll get to at least a couple that have already come in. I did want to ask, and this is maybe more directed for Coastline, but I did want to ask, we often hear that employers are the most effective advocates for apprenticeship, for instance, employer-to-employer communication. And recognizing that it's early days, at least in the cyber industry, I'm curious if you are active in professional associations or industry associations through which you could share experiences as employers with other employers.
So this is Nancy, and so you're right. We have been able, getting apprentices my biggest concern. When we first started, it's like, okay, how am I going to talk these people into taking these well-qualified students and things? But once the door opened up, so Craig obviously came on board. He had to work through the logistics of having it work, but we have 4 or 5 students, apprentices, who are placed at one of the contractors at the Los Angeles Air Force Base. So that was word of mouth because my husband worked up there. I had him kind of, drop information about our program there. Someone called us, and so now we're having more and more contractors who are contacting us. We also have connected with school districts. So, people don't realize the importance of keeping things secure. Craig does, obviously, but the K-12 districts don't have a lot of funding to be able to secure their networks, and so they have very limited cybersecurity training. And so once we broke into that and we, started training some of them, we've had multiple school districts who have come and asked us if they could have people join our apprenticeship program. So, once you start getting a little word out, people start coming to you. And so it's been a lot easier than I thought it would be. I'm not staying up nights worrying about placing the students anymore. So you just need to make sure that, you connect with those professional organizations. They also will give you inroads to different industries that you haven't thought about. But then also the word of mouth and, advisory committees. Does that help?
Yeah, that's wonderful. And a little similarly, knowing that we have like a minute left too, I'm wondering if there's no, that's totally fine. I'm wondering if there's like a translation for that from the intermediary's perspective, maybe a question for John, or if Margot, you're able to speak to how now you're operating in a more established field than IT and tech, but in terms of building out some of those recruitment pipelines, are you finding that you need to actively reach out to these community colleges or programs, or how does that relationship first start to develop?
It's got to be
from the city and county's perspective. We're a big dog in the park, right? So it is it's very easy for the city and county to do outreach around apprenticeship because we own the apprenticeship and we employ a lot of people. Our neighbors and our regional neighbors are very supportive of us in a very interesting way. They're very supportive of us having apprenticeship because it not only helps them, but it helps in terms of not poaching their people, but it also helps in terms of building the pool of eligible candidates for everyone's jobs. So there's a lot of cooperative support. We work very closely with IACA and other agencies, and as a municipality, we work in other community groups. So if you asked about the other associations, unions are huge. Unions are probably our biggest pipeline out because they are both statewide and international.
We also find that the pre-apprenticeship program that we developed is a great feeder for the apprenticeship program. Obviously, you have to have a linkage agreement between the two, but we find that it's very difficult to find people that are even qualified enough to step into the introductory positions of apprenticeship because they really don't require a whole lot of skill, but it's more of a knowledge base that these jobs actually are available and exist. So we found that the pre-apprenticeship program gives a lot of folks the knowledge of what's available, and once they see that, they get pretty excited about it. And it's also linked, there is an employment component to our pre-apprenticeship program, so it also helps on the other side of the employers that participate in the work experience portion, that they see talented people that they look at and say, hey, I want this individual in my organization. How do I go about doing that? And we come back and say, set up an apprenticeship program, participate in our apprenticeship program, and they can step into those positions.
Great. Great. I really appreciate it all, and thanks everybody for hanging on. Oh, we did get one last question that came in. I know we're a couple of minutes over. I just, let me actually just ask this because it's a good one in from Don Davies Rigaud. Has anyone begun to think about youth apprenticeship as an initial step towards resolving the preparedness challenges?
We're way ahead of you.
Yeah.
We have a whole youth component, but not for this webinar. But yes, the San Francisco has a whole youth component.
Great. Anything from Coastline real quick on youth?
Nope, we haven't been looking at that, sorry.
Okay. Okay. I really appreciate the time, the wealth of information. Thank you both. There's a million more questions I know we wanted to ask, but I appreciate it. We have contact information for both Dr. Nancy and John up on their emails. If you had specific questions for them, you can also reach out to me or our friends at the foundation if you have questions that you wanted to follow up. Thanks everybody for attending this February webinar. We'll be back with an invite to you shortly for our upcoming webinar in March. We will be in touch. That last question that came over about contact information for Margot Reed, I'll follow up directly for that as well. So thanks everybody. I hope you have a really wonderful rest of the week, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for contacting Coastline College. A Coastline representative